DE, it's been a little while, man. Thanks for coming back on. Sunday afternoon.
Thank you for having me, sir. It's
So,
always a good listen, and I think you've been doing a wonderful job finding really interesting people to talk to and kind of hit multiple angles of the poly crisis, I guess would be the term, right? There's all sorts of stuff going wrong, and you're finding the guys to talk to, Michael Yon or Matt Bracken or Jim Kunstler or what do you call it? Three bald guys with Tom and Jim
column.
and Colin. Yeah, it was fantastic. Love every one of those guys individually, and then when they're together, it's just you just toss the bone in the ring and they fight over it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's I don't have to do much for that, man. You just turn the recorder on, and I could probably step away for 2 hours, and it wouldn't make that much of a difference.
Oh, but I think it's really important actually because someone like Jim Kunstler, right? He had a career, and I've been a big fan of his for many years, right? He had a career, with the with the smart set. He had big time book publishing deals and was featured in big magazines like the New Yorker or the Atlantic or something. But he started telling the truth about things like COVID and the stolen election, and he got labeled a kook, and people's, the smart set kept talking to him. And in fact, it's because of his honesty that he was, shoved aside. And I think that his writing is more important now than it's ever been because he's willing to touch the third rail, as it were, and not compromise on telling the truth as best he sees it. And that's, I think most of your guests have that in common. And I really just want to thank you for, finding all these people and bringing them to those of us who are in the listenership. And I'm one of those. I probably listened to 500 episodes of Coffee and a Mike.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the kind words. And it's yesterday. I was, and I should have known better that I was going to walk into this with the whole when I put it on Substack. It started off with I reshared a article that my friend Matt Smith wrote, talking about the digital age that we're moving into, and which is not to spend a ton of time talking about the election, but I was skeptical of the way it went down, right? Because, based on 2020, they stole it, in my opinion. And all of a sudden you had, the tech oligarchs, they all came behind Trump this go around. And I believe that they paved the way for him to get in. But, people were pushing back on me, and they're like, well, I wish you quit, selling doom, or not selling doom, pushing doom, and you need to have hope. And you know what? For those people that if they listen to this, like, I don't have to sell hope. I'm not selling hope. I don't have a mug that says hope on it. I'm selling it. I try to be objective. I bring people on to be objective. I'm just not buying into all this. And I'm sorry if it offends people, but I was going for my run yesterday, and I went down to Phoenix. I mean, I live in Phoenix, but I'm in the north part, so I was down more central, like closer to downtown. And man, I walk into there's a Safeway, and walked in there to get a bottle of water, and man, you just see the decay in our society. Like, you don't have to be a genius to see it.
Right. Well, when people are doing apps like how to avoid human waste in the streets of San Francisco, right? That's a problem. Was it Jan Brewer, the last Republican governor of Arizona, who tried to stop Arizona from funding illegal immigrants with state funds? I can't remember. There was a ballot initiative or something in Arizona that got struck down by a federal judge, right? And this was maybe 10 years ago. I forget exactly, right? But, Arizona went from electing Barry Goldwater to, like, Gallardo, who's, he's cartel connected, isn't he? Like,
I'm sorry, you talking about. I'm sorry, Gallego is the senator, and then Katie Hobbs is the governor, and then Adrian Fontes is supposedly was an attorney for the cartel. That's the Secretary
Okay,
of State.
right. But like,
And then Gallego's ex-wife is the mayor of Phoenix.
right, yeah, who's a Saturday person, right? Like, you can't make this stuff up, right? And so, the mayors of the six biggest cities in America, right, are not, white Christian Americans, right? This is an issue, and unless you can talk about these issues, you're not going to solve any of them, right? Like the great contribution of America to the spiritual life is Alcoholics Anonymous, and the first step is you got to admit that there's a problem, right? And as someone who's made big changes in his life, which right, you admitted that, like, hey, I was really overweight, and so, like, I got to change this. This is a problem. I can't just accept this anymore. I got to do something different. And it's not to say that you had to, like, go to a 12-step program or something, but the first step in anything is recognizing that there's a problem that needs to be solved. And the state of Arizona right now is just whistling past the graveyard of, like, oh, this is fine. Like, you're going to have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who are here illegally, many of them not very well educated, many of them with criminal backgrounds, with criminal connections, and you're depending on the Colorado River staying full and Los Angeles and Las Vegas not drinking your milkshake. Like, well, why wouldn't they? Are the people in LA all of a sudden, like, super altruistic and, like, what we need to do is, like, not shower so that the people in Phoenix can have water for their lawns? No, it's going to be a fight with Phoenix and Los Angeles and Las Vegas, and what is it, like 8 million people in LA, 6 million people in the Phoenix metro area, like 2 million in Vegas. I can't remember the exact numbers, right? But, like, that's when you throw in San Diego and just other Southern California communities, you're talking like 20 million people in a desert where there's no water, and we're supposed to just ignore that. My friends at a wonderful podcast called Myth of the 20th Century, they did an episode maybe 2 years ago about just how much work went into, like, building the dam system in the American West. I think it was called Cadillac Desert or something. But in a society that can't do things like keep the roads paved, you think they're going to maintain this, elaborate, highly complex system of dams on the Colorado? Like, that's not going to happen over the long term.
No, and at some point, something is going to happen here. Now, it might not be in my lifetime, but I don't want to be here for it. And this place, to me, same with LA and same with Vegas, it was never designed to handle this many millions of people. It's not what this was intended for. And people, man, they keep building here. More people are moving. And I'll tell you the other thing, too, to add to what you said, about our current state government. The homeless population is just getting worse and worse and worse. I see it out my door. I literally was walking out the door one morning to start my run, and coming down my stairwell, right underneath, there's a water spigot, filling up the water bottles, because I live right next to open, like, desert. They live in the desert. And the cities come in there to clear it out. They just come right back. They don't care.
Right. Well, they don't. And if you do care, right, under the present disposition, you're a bad person, right? This thing in Minnesota is an illustrative example. Lady by the name of Shiloh Hendricks gets filmed swearing at people using slurs. But a Somali kid was stealing from her kid and, like, rifling through her stuff. And the guy who filmed her after she swore at this kid, is an alleged sex offender, and she raised a ton of money. And a lot of people in the comments on her Gives and Go, I think, were really angry. And one of the reasons they're really angry is that they've seen nothing but double standards and hypocrisy from other people. And you can't live like that, where if you work really hard in the Phoenix metro area to be conscientious with your water and be responsible and, you know, act like you live in a desert, then you see other people just wantonly wasting things or making things worse, like leaving trash everywhere. How long can you live like that and have it not deteriorate, right?
Well,
You can't.
here's the other thing.
And you can't.
Okay.
There's no major city in America where you don't have this just slapping in the face every day, where it doesn't smell like there's trash everywhere and it smells awful and there's homeless people everywhere. And if you're concerned about that, right, you're the bad person because you're like, oh, you want to put these, you don't want to give these people maximum freedom. I'm like, well, whatever I want to do, importing 10 million people during the Biden regime or more, right? We have no idea how many people actually, isn't going to help make this problem better. It's not going to solve this problem. It's going to make it worse, right? Because there's only so many houses to go around, and you just imported 5, 10, 15, 20. How many million people did you just import, forcing other people out of their houses? Why are there all these, Zoomers and late millennials like talking about van life? Like, they're homeless, man. You have kids on YouTube talking about how to be homeless and make it cool because they live in their van. You're old enough and I'm old enough to remember Chris Farley being like, and then you'll live in a van. Like, living in a van down the river is now the dream, right? Like, now that's the aspiration of, like, maybe I'll have a decent van down by the river as opposed to being 40 years old and living with my parents because there's nowhere for me to have a house.
Well, in coming back to the homeless situation for a second, I have I have a uncle who lives in Vegas, and he's been there for a long time, and he always say, like, Cleveland, good place to be from, and I said, you know what? I mean, I wouldn't move back to Cleveland itself, but somewhere in Northeast Ohio, a small town, because and people bitch about the winter, and I could be talking to you in January there and be bitching about it too, but keeps the homeless at bay. They're not in the suburbs in January in Northeast Ohio. They can't handle it. So you know what? I'll take it. I'll deal with the salt. I'll deal with driving in snow. To not have to do this, share a community with homeless people. I don't give a fuck.
Well, how can you, right, to actually address any of these problems, whatever they are, pick something. It doesn't matter what. You're going to have to gore the sacred, a sacred cow of the media or the left or somebody, right? There's no broad consensus anymore where, like, hey, girls sports, like, you're going to allow girls, boys and girls sports? What are you talking about? That's crazy. Oh, no, that's bigoted. Well, okay. Guess I'm bigoted. I don't think that, foreigners with this catastrophically low IQs, the average IQ in Somalia is something in the 60s. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's really low, right? And we can debate whether that's a genetic thing, a lack of nutrition thing, a cultural thing, whatever. Or same for Haiti, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's like Springfield, Ohio, or Rochester, Minnesota. When you import these people who, for whatever reason, are really not that bright, when we have AI and robots and all these other things coming in the future, what are they going to do for jobs? They're already, on the state welfare rolls at very, very high rates. What are you going to do when there's literally no jobs for anybody? Like when janitors and fast food workers and garbage people have been replaced by AI and like robots. They've already got the garbage man replacement thing where you just drive up and the arm grabs a trash can and throws it in there, where it used to be like, a big burly dude who would ride in the back of the truck, right? And and toss it in. Well, now that guy's replaced by a robot. What happens when that truck is self-driving? You
I
know,
I think it's a double-edged sword too, though, because not only that, but at the top level, from an AI standpoint, I mean, it's gonna decimate a lot of white
oh,
collar jobs too.
there's not going to be CPAs in the future. You're not going to do your own taxes. You're just going to feed your into tax I, tax AI or something, and it's going to argue back and forth with like the IRS AI, and they'll come to some sort of equitable thing, and your ticket will be fed to you and said, "Oh, you owe X amount of dollars," and that'll be the end of it. How many thousands of workers are going to get,
The
like you're just not going to.
the CPA degree is gonna the value of that degree is gonna plummet down to next to nothing.
I mean, it very well might. I don't know, for sure, but like that ought to be something that a sane. If Gallardo, that's the senator from Arizona, right?
Gallego.
Gallego, okay. I'm sorry. If Gallego, what's he really worried about, right? Oh, the Trump administration is he's basically like an ethnic lobbyist in the Senate for Latinos, right? That's what he spends most of his time doing is saying, "Hey, Whitey, you need to." And despite the fact that he's like pale as all get out, right? Like he has more loyalty to his co-ethnics in Central and South America than he does to Americans, right? Arizona used to be a land of cowboys and miners, right? And he doesn't think that those people like deserve to be represented or that they're good people or that they have any interests that are legitimate. And he thinks that those people like need to be deserve to be like destroyed and replaced. And like that's what he's said. Like you can go to what his what his public statements, and that's basically what he's saying. And regardless of what you might think of President Trump, I'm not a big fan at the moment, right? I think he's getting us into all these wars that we voted him to not get into, and I think he's done a bad job on the border. He wasn't prepared. I want to know where the Epstein list is, right? There's a bunch of stuff that could be going better. But Senator, your state is going to go bankrupt. Your state's going to run out of water. Millions of people are going to be thrust into poverty in your state. Why are you not talking with the president, working with the president, to try and solve this crisis at the border that, affects your state directly? Why is Greg Abbott sitting here? San Marcos might be full of, hippies, but it's a real legit question. Why is $4 million of the town of San Marcos's money going to Israel when Texas has the same sort of crises as Arizona does, right? Huge expanding population, crisis is the border. I mean, I forget who it was that you had on. It was probably last year, talking about how Texas is already having to lie about their municipal tax assessments, right, to cover their budget, right? So if that's already happening in Texas, why are you even concerned, Governor Abbott or Senator Conran or whoever else? Why are you concerned with this issue in Israel? Well, I mean, the answer is obvious, right? Whether it's Republicans like Abbott or Democrats like Ruben Gallardo, they don't work for Americans. They don't care about America. They're not interested in solving American problems. And until you like deal with that as a fact of life, you're not going to get anything done politically. It's just not going to happen.
Do you think this system is salvageable? I mean, you and I have talked several times.
No. Okay. No, it's not. And I'll give you a couple reasons why.
Before you answer that, did you? I'm sure I asked you this, but just in case I didn't, did you feel that way before the election? I mean, how long have you felt this way for?
Off and on about 10 years, but the last 3 or 4 months of the Trump administration have proved to me, or last 100 days or whatever it is, have proved to me that there's no salvaging it. Because if Donald Trump was interested in peace, like he just would have cut off the Ukrainians and said, okay, like we're not, he would have told he if Donald Trump was interested in actually doing his job, he would have sent JD Vance to Germany and told AFD or told the German state, like, you will not ban AFD or, the bases that we have here where we're, Ramstein Air Force Base will be used to liberate Germany from your corrupt, evil government that is trying to destroy the German nation, the German economy, and German people. He would have, we have bases in England. He would have told Keir Starmer, like, you're not going to throw people in jail for protesting little girls getting killed while you let, gang rapists go because they're Pakistani and it would be racist. And the fundamental crisis we have right now is that everybody on, some exceptions exist, on the fringes, but the right-wing guys are all like John Locke liberals, and the left wing are all like John Rawls liberals. And the whole discourse basically is the left wing accuses the right wing of being bad Rawlsian liberals, and the right wing accuses the left wing of being bad Lockean liberals. And they're both right insofar as that's true. But what they're wrong about is that the whole idea was dumb to begin with. And, we're going to have to come to some sort of modus vivendi where we start thinking about, like, what if this whole idea of everyone being free and equal citizens, equally capable of making their own decisions, economically independent, yeoman farmer types like Thomas Jefferson wanted, what if that's not true? And it isn't true, right? Like, look at COVID. How many people just went along with it because they were told? Despite all the evidence that it was, bullshit. How many people even bothered looking up the evidence? I'm even asking the question, is this nonsense or not?
It said it right on the bag of the masks that it doesn't stop COVID. It said it on the packaging. And I would try to explain it to people that had lost their minds, and they didn't even want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, not only do they not want to hear it, but they're incapable of receiving new information. I mean, it could just be, there's, you go to YouTube now, right? And there's just tons and tons and tons of AI-generated fake stories read in an AI voice about, like, tales from Reddit or something like that. So I don't even know if this is true, but I've seen screenshots. Again, possibly true, possibly not. I have no idea. There's an epistemological crisis going on right now because of AI. No one knows anything, right? if I didn't see your face and know, there could be just this AI character named Mike Ferris that's out there talking to people, and is it real? I don't know. I receive it electronically, but right, there's all these fake stories out there, and I'm seeing screenshots of mothers who, like, kicked their 15, 16, 17-year-old kids out of the house because 3 years after COVID, they stopped wearing masks. And it's like, I want to believe that this is, like, made up engagement bait. But then again, I drive, go into the big city and I still see people wearing masks in their car. It's like, okay, this person has gone insane. They've lost their mind. And, that person is not only not prepared to deal with the stuff you talk about, but if you want to get, like, really down into it, like, you want to go down the rabbit hole with Dave Cullum and be like, actually, probably most of the people in charge of the Western world are satanic pedophiles who have sex with kids and sacrifice them to Satan. And Dave Collins not a crazy person. Like, he didn't come to this conclusion just because like the voices told him. He's a guy that actually did, like, he's a PhD scientist, right? Who talks, everything else he says sounds pretty sane. And then he'll just bring up, oh, by the way, like, Michelle Obama's a dude. Now, if he was like telling you that 2 and 2 is 111 on your podcast, you might go, oh, maybe Dave Collins is a little bit crazy. But he's the guy that's constantly telling you 2 and 2 is 2, or 2 and 2 is 4, and 4 and 4 is 8 all the time. And then he'll throw this other thing in here and then tell you, well, why he believes that, Big Mike is a dude and that there are pedophiles running everything. And he'll bring receipts and he'll tell you, like, look, man, you might not want to swim in this particular pool because you can never unsee it. It's not fun. I mean, right? You can't ever look at the people in Washington the same ever again after you've gone down that rabbit hole with Dave Collins.
Yeah, and they're not.
You got to wonder.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
Because you got to wonder which ones. Like, is that nice smiling lady? Does she secretly like bathe in the blood of kids? And that's not even an exaggeration. Like, is that something that this person does? Possible. Depending on where they're at, probable even.
And you haven't heard any mention of all those kids that disappeared during the 4 years of Biden. There's been no talk of that since Trump came back in office.
Right, yeah, like 20 million people cross the border, and how many kids unaccompanied just
vanished?
How many kids in Arizona by itself? Senator Guerrero, like, there's a bunch of kids in your state that went missing. Kids, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. What happened to them? Like, that should, I would think, merit the attention of the governor, or the secretary of state, or the senator from Arizona. But it doesn't. Why not? Can't be because they don't know about it. Well, if they don't know about it, or they know about it, why didn't they do anything about it? Is it that they don't care? Like, if you don't care about a bunch of missing kids who might be, sexually abused, you're a really bad person. So what is it then?
Do you think Arizona is one of the worst states to live in right now? Because just from the vulnerability standpoint of what we talked about with water and the millions that have come in, California, across the border. I mean, you get the major cities, New York, Chicago, LA. Obviously, you don't want to live near all the major cities, but Phoenix is at the top of the spot due to the fact with no water.
Well, I don't know if like the best of the worst. It's not. I don't think there's anywhere good right now. Well, let me put it that way. Like, I don't think you can go to like Wyoming and just be like, everything is great here. Ha ha. I'm in Wyoming and none of these problems will touch me. I mean, there's places you can go that be better or worse, but there's nowhere where it's going to be, fine while everything else falls apart elsewhere. I think Arizona's in a great deal of trouble for multiple reasons. Water being one of them. The California refugee problem being another one. The ethnic conflict reconquista stuff that Matt Bracken talked about, 15 years ago with his Enemies, Foreign and Domestic trilogy, right? Where, is there a functional difference, with the cartels wanting to be sovereign, like, I guarantee you there's counties on the border where they have the sheriff in their pocket. Is that any? If they have the sheriff and the city council and the mayor in their pocket, like, that's cartel territory. It's not America anymore. I mean, do they have to call it Aztlan before it becomes Aztlan in reality? Not really. I mean, look back at our own history. The United States, the colonies, they were pretty much functioning without much in the way of governance from the British Isles long before 1776. It was just the Declaration of Independence was just a recognition of the way things really were. Virginia had its House of Delegates, and they passed the laws and paid the taxes, and there's the town meetings in New England. Why? Is Arizona America anymore? I mean, parts of it are probably, but parts of it aren't. Yes. Texas, same thing. I mean, California, the election in Canada recently, right? Like, is Vancouver even Canadian anymore? Or is it like Asian diasporas fighting it out over who's going to be sovereign over that territory in Vancouver?
Yeah, somebody said, well, if something were to happen with a power outage in Phoenix, you could just go up to Flagstaff. I'm like, yeah, because you can take the one interstate that'll get you up there. There's 6 million people that live down here. You think you're going to just drive up the freeway and get there, and people are going to welcome you with open arms?
No, there's going to be like a enterprising farmer or miner or somebody who's, going to put a ton of rock, blast a ton of rock on a switchback up the mountains to keep the Phoenix people from overrunning Flagstaff or Prescott or anywhere else in Arizona, because they don't want to die, they don't want to be next in line.
It'd be a firing squad. It'd be like a firing squad of people gunning you down if you try to come in.
I mean, it might be, but if the senator, right, is just plainly anti-white, right, which he is, and the governor is this corrupt, former Secretary of State who, like, obviously you can't trust her to be fair because she steals elections. Who can you trust on? Like, and if the public schools or the hospitals in Arizona are basically just ethnic rackets by which non-Americans extract money from the pockets of Americans, right? To a pretty great extent, right? The Phoenix school district is that already, right? How many American kids go to school in Phoenix? In the Phoenix school district? Or is the entire school district being taken over by, the children of illegal immigrants and illegal immigrants? Is it 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 60%? I don't know. But if that's who the majority of the people at the school are, it's not an educational institution that, like, everyone in the community participates in. It's an ethnic racket where other people extract money from Arizonans to benefit themselves. And with this thing in Minnesota, right? The Americans, the white Americans, push back even ever so slightly, and gives and goes, shuts down the comments, and decries the horrible, awful racism. Wait, what about a horrible, awful racism of that police chief in Las Vegas who got run down by two diverse Utes who was riding his bicycle? What about Austin Metcalf? What about the McMichaels with the whole Ahmaud Arbery thing? Like, oh, he was just checking out construction sites. No, he was a thief. What about Trayvon Martin or Mike Brown? Like, these examples go back years and years and years, and I'm sure you can probably think of half a dozen examples just in the Phoenix metro area where somebody, it didn't make the national news because for whatever reason, but you can think of examples in the Phoenix metro area where, a non-American criminal did something horrendous, was attacked or shot or whatever, and the police did their job, and like there was this hue and cry of the racism of the system or the whatever. It's like, well, wait a second. Either the rules are the rules and everybody plays by them, or we're all just ethnic groups out to loot the corpse of the United States of America. And you guys are constantly acting like that's the thing. Right? You come here, you get all kinds of free stuff from the state, you don't contribute to anything. And the second that an American person says, whoa, that's not how this is not how the game is supposed to be played here. Everybody gets a free, everyone gets their shot. And, merit matters and accomplishment matters and, best man for the job or whatever it is, right? That old American dream, that Lockean classical liberal dream. They know that if those are the standards, their group won't do as well. And it doesn't matter if it's because it's genetically, the genetic IQ thing, like Jared Taylor would say, or if it's a cultural thing or whatever. Arizona public schools for half a century have shown, right, the children of white Arizonans do better on tests than the children of Hispanic Arizonans. Now, if you lived in an honest society, a society that would actually care about the truth, you might actually get somebody in, the Arizona Department of Education who wanted to figure out why that was. And they might say, well, we did a longitudinal study of 10,000 kids, and we figured out it's 60% this and 35% that and 5% this other thing over here. But they never do that, do they? Katie Hobbs is always talking about, the intense racism of our colonial past and how we need to decolonize our structures and listen to indigenous voices and, whatever. I can't remember the last thing I saw from her but it was nonsense along those kind of lines, right? And, well, okay, Governor, like that sounds nice, I guess, but it's not actually solving your problem. Your education system needs to produce people that can actually do things like maintain the Hoover Dam. And right now it's not. Why not?
Yeah, and it's like you said, they're not interested in solving it, and it just signals to me like, the next place I live, like I said, I want to live in a place where there's water, and not that Ohio's perfect either, but any type of crisis here, 95% of the city would be dead, maybe even more, maybe 99. I don't know, 99.9 would not survive, especially if it happened in the summer.
Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be like a big crisis, right? Like the entire power grid of Spain went down, and part of France, right? Like, whoa.
Let me interrupt you a second, because I had a relative, I had a cousin over there, was over there last week, right? And her dad, my uncle, I was talking to about it, and I'm of the opinion they're in that blissfully unaware category. And my uncle was like, "Oh, just bad timing," which probably was bad timing. But I've been saying for a few years now, and people, well, you're living in fear. I wouldn't leave the country unless you're moving. I wouldn't go over to Europe and just vacation. And this is a prime example of why you shouldn't leave. And luckily, they got the power restored. They didn't have to go through the night of not having power, because that's when bad shit happens. Especially to your point with all the illegals that have gone over there, that have invaded Europe. It's not where I would want to be. And I said, hopefully she comes back with a less of a blissfully unaware attitude and more of a, maybe I won't do these types of trips right now. It's probably not smart. But, people just blow my mind, man. Like they have no
Well,
idea what's going on.
well, I mean, yeah, that's for a guy who's been paying attention for a long time. It's amazing, right? But like you were basically a normie 5 years ago, right?
Of course. Yeah,
And
yeah. Oh, yeah.
all right, but Matt Bracken, I read his books when they came out, right? And I'm always like really super grateful because then someone like you who was just a normal dude and then like saw things and now sees things the way I see them or even worse, right? Like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like, Mike Ferris has come along and gone through that same process of like seeing just how bad things really are and then understanding the situation. But like the Spanish fought a war for 700 years to keep the Moroccans from completely taking over Spain. And they just threw a lady named Isabella Peralta, who's an activist, identitarian activist in Spain, who's like 22 years old, beautiful gal, for saying that I don't want Spain to be Morocco. Well, why are there so many Moroccans in Spain that she feels like that this is a problem? Right? Didn't the United States fight a war to make Arizona American? And it's going to be Mexican again. It's already Mexican again in places without a shot being fired. And do the people who are there that are Mexican that have come here recently, are they like, freedom, individuality, hard work, the free market? These things, they were a good thing, and we're glad to be here, and we want to make Arizona a better place. No, they vote for Ruben Gallardo and Katie Hobbs and complain constantly about how racist white people are. And right, like if they wanted to make Arizona a place that was worth living in, they wouldn't do the same stuff that they were doing in Mexico that made Mexico a not good place and why they left. 20 years ago in Phoenix, there wasn't trash on the ground anywhere, except maybe in the really bad neighborhoods. Now you walk through downtown Phoenix and there's trash everywhere. Now you walk through downtown Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, there's trash everywhere. It smells bad. That was it never used to be this way. Why is this acceptable? Why is it acceptable that the supposedly super wealthy country, we have cities that smell like pee all the time? Like pee and weed. Is that something that people should be proud of? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I last time I was in Phoenix a couple years ago, right? Just everything smelled like marijuana. There was trash everywhere. I mean,
Yeah, the panhandlers in down. I don't know where you were, but Central Phoenix down. They're under the bridges on the freeways.
Yeah.
But here's what's crazy about that. I think we touched on this last time. Like I have a friend that lives. He's in Central Phoenix, and it's a little house. Probably I'm gonna guess is built in the '80s. A little one-story like track home down there. I want to say it's listed for like $600,000. That is insane to me.
Well, and that's just Jim Kunstler, right? Who you've had on a bunch of times. Like, why is that worth that much money?
It's a little nothing house. It's maybe 1,400 square feet. Like it's a little. It doesn't even have a garage. It's got like a little carport. A spot that could have maybe there's a garage there too, like a single car garage. But either way, nothing.
It's not sitting on a gold mine. There's not like an oil well in the backyard, right? Like, if there was a oil derrick in the backyard that was pumping away and generating you $500,000 a year, right? Like, okay, like that, buying that piece of property makes some sense. Like, yeah, it's paying me to live here. But right, Phoenix is one of the like most spread out cities in America. Well, even if, right, this is where that polycrisis stuff comes in, and this is where everyone should be reading Jim Kunstler, right? What is going to happen to those people who live 10 miles from the river when the state of Arizona or the city of Phoenix can't afford to maintain the fire hydrants or maintain the streetlights 10 miles from the river anymore? Right? And I'll give you an example. So the boomers are from 1946 to 1964, which means the median baby boomer is turning 70 this year, because 18 years, 60 is 9 years, 46, 9, 2025. So the median boomer is turning 70 this year.
Next year, right? Yeah.
No, this year. So if the boomer generation goes from 46 to 64, right? That's 18 years. So the median one.
Oh, the median, I'm sorry. So it's, yeah.
The middle one, right? Demographics is like a lump that goes through a snake, right? So that median boomer, the middle of them, the big lump in the middle, born in 54, 55, or 56, is turning 70 this year. Are they going to be working much longer? I mean, maybe part-time, some of them, but they're mostly going to be retired. Okay. Ever since the 1968 teachers strike in New York City, the way they solved that crisis was by creating a crisis down the road that anyone who could read an actuarial table knew was going to be a crisis around this time, the mid-2020s, by about 1990. And let me explain. In the 68 crisis, to solve the strike, Albert Schenker, the president of, I think it was the American Federation of Teachers, the teachers union in New York City, basically made it so your wages wouldn't be ridiculous as a teacher, right? But your pension was ridiculous. Your pension was gold plated, right? So you'd make the equivalent of today of like $75,000, $80,000, like a respectable middle class income, right? For the time. But after 20 years teaching, you'd get like 100% of your salary or 90% of your salary or whatever, and healthcare in perpetuity till you died, right? Which is like, you've been working for 20 years at least, right?
Yeah, more.
Right. I've been doing the same. Like, and I'm not that old. So you'd have somebody who graduate, college at 22, 23, retire as a teacher from in their mid 40s, have this gold plated pension, and then they'd go do something else for the last 2 decades of their working life. And they'd have, basically 2 jobs, the second income. And that became the standard throughout. Like, once the teachers in New York got that kind of deal, the teachers in Los Angeles or Boston or Phoenix or Washington, D.C. or everywhere all asked for the same deal, and they all basically got it. So as that cohort of baby boomers, right, reaches that 70 years old, they're all pulling from the system now. They're 70 years old, man. They're not working, putting money into Social Security. They're pulling out. Well, where's the value from the stock market? Like, if all these pensions aren't, constantly getting money put into them, looking for assets to buy, but they're having to sell assets now because they've got to meet the demand for all these baby boomers. What's the stock market going to do? It's going to crash, because What's the underlying value? This house that's supposedly worth $600,000. That's a postage stamp in a bad, in a bad place to be because there's homeless people, camping 2 doors down from him. They're walking through his yard, or they might be. Right. And if he says, "Hey, don't walk through my yard," one of them flashes his knife and, like this is right. And if he does something about it, the local Phoenix CBS affiliate, shows up at his house, parks the camera in front of his front yard, says, "Sir, why are you racist?" So I'm like, "I'm not racist. There was a guy with a knife who tried to threaten my kids." Right. But then people show up at his house and maybe the cartels throw a Molotov cocktail through his window. So why is that house worth $600,000? And there's someone somewhere, in a bank, right, who's like, "Oh no, we have this asset, we have this, we underwrote that mortgage, the mortgage-backed security of this asset that's worth $600,000." Well, what if it's really only worth like 190? What are you going to do then? What about the commercial tower in downtown Phoenix that's 2/3 empty because people work from home now, and your book value that you're the big bank and you're depending on that place being 85 to 95% occupied at all times for that asset on your books to be worth something, right? Like, these are real serious issues and no one is talking about them. I mean, you are, Dave Collum does, Matt Bracken does, Jim Kunstler does, but you got to go to places like Coffee and Mike to hear anybody tell the truth about it. Like, people should have their hair on fire and be screaming about that thing you talked about with the Texas tax assessor's office. I can't remember which show it was and who was the guest. I'd have to look through the archives. But like, do you think the Phoenix tax assessor's office is any more honest than the one in Texas or Los Angeles or Tampa?
No, no, and it
or Houston. Like, it's impossible to ask us to answer. Of course not.
Well, and that's where it's funny. I put up on Substack yesterday. My friend Matt Smith wrote an article talking about the new. I'm butchering the title. Let me make sure I get this right so he doesn't get this right for his sake. He wrote basically the great Trump is ushering in the Great Reset. I mean, they're doing it, and COVID was phase 1 of it, or stage 1. People just went along with it, and they're going to go along with this.
Well, I mean, not only are people going to go along with it, but like on what you see, right? Not Aristotle, pardon me. Archimedes said, "You give me a lever long enough and a place to stand on, and I can move the world." And what the system right now is absolutely 100% intent on doing is not giving Americans a place to stand on. Not your church, not your local community, not your neighborhood, not a school, nothing. There can be no source of solidarity for you as an American. We're going to take those away from you. Everyone else gets their ethnic lobby, their community association, their person in Congress, right? Ilhan Omar has sat there and said, my job is to get money for Somalia in Congress. Well, where's the person in Congress who says, my job is to help white people? My job is to help, left-handed ginger Koreans. Why can't anybody just say, hey, I'm helping these people? Well, because you're the one being stolen from. That's why.
So his article is called, let me just, the digital control grid hidden in plain sight is the name of his article. I should send it to you to look at because I thought it was really interesting.
I'll take a look. Yeah, no, and Matt's fantastic, right? But this is right. You pay your taxes online. You do all your shopping online because you can't go to the mall, right? If you even have a local mall anymore, right? It's run down. It's full of weirdos.
They're dead. They're all dead.
Yeah. There's weeds and growing through the cracks of the parking lot, right? Why, and part of the reason all these malls died is, taboo to talk about, but that's the fact, right? Wild gangs of youths run around the mall, committing crime and harassing folks. Like, well, people stop going to the mall. And if you're not going to be willing to talk about these issues, honestly, you're not going to solve any of them. And Donald Trump, for all of his bluster and all of his, supposedly breaking the rules, he doesn't address these issues any more honestly than anyone else. I mean, J.D. Vance does to a certain limited extent, but why is Donald Trump picking a fight with Iran? I mean, does anybody have any idea how big a disaster that would be? It's called the Persian Gulf, for goodness sakes. They could completely shut down oil coming out of the Persian Gulf. Do you think America's in a bad spot now? Wait till gas is $10 a gallon. What do you think is going to happen to Europe when they're paying, $36 for, 4 liters of gas, which is, they do off liters, which is basically a quarter gallon, right? Like, what's going to happen to those people? You're going to have people freezing to death in the winter in places like Minnesota, Northern England, Finland. If you invade Iran, they have this alliance with Russia. They have a defensive pact. They have, the whole war in Ukraine. It's mostly because Victoria Newlands is still salty about, a pogrom that happened in 1648. But the reason the Russians cannot let Ukraine be hostile to them is tied into the geographic alliance with Ukraine. The Volga River, which flows through Moscow and is the heartland river of Russia, flows into the Caspian Sea, which is a big lake that is landlocked. So the Russians have no access from their major heartland river to the open ocean, except through this north-south corridor that Matt Bracken has talked about with Iran, right? This north-south trade corridor that they're going to put a bunch of ships on the Caspian and, do this fast freight offloading and loading and all of that. But the only places that they have access to the open ocean and trade are in the way far north in Archangel, where the movie with Tom Hanks playing the destroyer captain World War II, right? We ran a bunch of supplies through there. New Archangel, right? Like in the Arctic Ocean, just impassable most of the year, completely frozen over. In St. Petersburg on the Baltic, right? But the Danes can shut that in a second because there's only like 2 or 3 small little channels through to get out from the Baltic into the open ocean in the North Sea. The Danes completely control it. There's a bunch of islands right there between Denmark and Sweden. Or they can go through the Caspian, or not the Caspian. They can go through the Black Sea and Crimea. Okay, so if Vladimir Putin does not have access to world markets, his country is catastrophically affected. I don't know if they'd starve to death necessarily, but catastrophically affected. And the United States, much like we did with Japan in the 1930s, was just constantly poking the bear, like, well, you can't import oil, you can't import food. So the Japanese had almost no choice but to declare war on us. So we're doing the same sort of thing to Russia, and then surprised when they react in the same certain way. Well, the British and Soviets invaded Iran in the Second World War to take it over, to secure a supply route up through the Caucasus, like through Iran and into what is now Azerbaijan and Armenia and Georgia. And that supply line supplied 40 divisions worth of supplies to the Soviets from the Allies. That's enough. Like, that's enough to win the war right there. 40 divisions. 40. The division's about 10,000 men, right? So just do the math on that. That's a huge chunk of the Soviet army. Those same geographic factors, cause problems today. And if, the United States starts a war with Iran at the behest of Israel, right? Those same problems occur today. Then all of a sudden, the Iranians, with their secure supply line with the Russians that's internal to Asia, they can trade with the Chinese, with the Russians internally. They can trade oil for weapons, and the Russians have, been using the last 3 years as a laboratory to figure out what works and what doesn't. And all of a sudden, there's no oil going through the Persian Gulf, because if you sail a tanker through the Straits of Hormuz, it gets blown up by an Iranian missile. It was manufactured in China or Russia. A hypersonic Iranian missile that will take like 2 minutes to go from, the secure launch site in the middle of the mountains, Zagros Mountains in Iran, to the ship, right? And boom, you're, billions of dollars of oil in your $1 billion ship, or all of a sudden a gigantic fireball on satellite maps, and no one goes through there, and gas is now $10 a gallon, and Americans are unable to go anywhere, and all their trucks are useless because they can't put gas in them, and their far-flung suburbs are unlivable because no one can get anywhere because gas is too expensive. Well, that's a freaking problem, man. And reasonable, sane people ask themselves the question of, like, well, if I do this thing, right? If I whack myself in the face with a shovel, is that going to be good or bad as an outcome? Most likely bad. Probably get a bare minimum, it's going to hurt. I might break my nose, lose a couple teeth. So I probably ought not do that. Well, why is America constantly like, what? I'm just going to whack myself in the face with a shovel? Why? Well, because Donald Trump, for all of his bluster, for all of his talk, for all of his isn't actually interested in solving the problem. Now, why that is, people can speculate. So because he's just an egomaniac, because he's in, Benjamin Netanyahu's pocket, who knows the real reason. But if Donald Trump is not focused on solving the actual problems in front of Americans, it is instead focused on fighting a war with Iran, fighting a war in Yemen, fighting the Ukrainian war continuously by proxy, not shutting that down. How is any of these other problems going to get better? We don't have the money or the manpower to solve our problems. There's only so much money to go around. You think the Chinese and the Indians and everyone else, the Europeans don't have any money. You think they're going to keep buying our bonds and subsidizing our trillions of dollars worth of deficit spending every year just because we ask nicely? It's not a a sane way to live. It's just not possible. And until you're dealing with people who will at least, I'm not saying everyone has to have the whole grand picture and know everything, but until you're willing to listen to people like Matt Bracken or Jim Kunstler or Tom Luongo or whatever that you, the people, kind of people you find here on Coffee and a Mike, no one, like nothing of these problems are going to get better. You know, and I just I really got to applaud you for being brave enough and going out and finding these people that are worth talking to. But there's not there's not any piece of this picture that looks like it's getting better without honestly discussing the issues.
Yeah, and the people that are, I was actually talking to somebody yesterday who, pretty staunch Trump supporter, and she even said to me, she's like, things just don't feel right. I'm like, I try to tell you. I go, yeah, it was a fun night because I saw the liberals in tears. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed that. It was great,
Oh, absolutely.
fantastic.
I despise Kamala Harris. Like
But
seeing her sad was a great thing.
but even just the people that I got, through my personal social media, right, like bitching and complaining, and it was fantastic, loved it. And but these people, these boomers, not all boomers. So people that email me say they get so mad I'm disparaging the boomers, but they thought that Trump was going to fix everything. And this is the golden age of America, and I'm like, you're wrong. You're wrong. That's not how this is going to go. I don't know exactly how it'll play out, but this thing is. You thought he'd come in and just fix everything, and everything will go away, and it'll be like what it was before COVID. And what's crazy to me right now too is the right side of the media. They're propaganda too. They're pushing all this. Oh, the jobs report's great. Everything's coming down. He's fixing everything. It's like, yeah, it just doesn't work that way. It took us years to get to where we're at. We are so rotted as a society. You can't fix it in 100 days. You can't fix it at all.
Well, to the extent that you could fix it, you'd have to be doing things. Like you'd have to just throw every federal judge who says like the Constitution is a suicide pact. You just have to throw them in jail.
And nobody's going to do that.
Nobody's going to do that. You know, Gallardo, right, when he says, the Trump administration is racist against Hispanics and we have to have, he needs to be told like, hey, buddy, you're an American senator, not a Mexican senator. You want to be a senator from Mexico? Fucking move to Mexico. Pardon my language. Right? But, I mean, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, like she bought a bunch of Palantir stock before, like some hearing and made a truckload of money, right? And she's one of the better people in Congress supposedly, right? So we have this group of people that they what do? They like give interviews and ask for money, and the legislative assistants are the ones who all do all the work. And these people go to Washington, and it's a small club, and they do insider trading and bribery for as long as they're there, and like none of the right, like Republicans have controlled the House. Why wasn't the second the president was sworn in, why wasn't there a bill on his desk ready to go for something like as basic as like all 50 states reciprocal concealed carry? I mean, yeah, great. Ross Ulbricht got freed, so the libertarians got a thing. Why wasn't there a whole legislative package of stuff ready to go so that people could defend themselves or at least move the ball in the right direction? And there's any number of things like tax on remittances. How many billions of dollars in remittances leave Arizona by itself in a year? Billions of dollars from one state. That's just a pure dead weight loss from Arizona, right? Because the person who's taking all that money and just shipping it wherever it is, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Venezuela, China, for all I know. Do you think that they're not using the emergency rooms? in Arizona. You know they're driving on the roads. You think their kids aren't in school in the free school lunch program? Of course they are. So how, right? Trump, what wasn't, what, you know, and we can ask ourselves like, okay, well, what are we going to do? And maybe things aren't as good. But again, like with this Shiloh Hendricks situation, right? You're going to have to be honest. And no one wants to be honest. Right? If the state of Minnesota just imported tens of thousands of Somalis, and an average IQ in Somalia is like 67, what are these people going to do? What are they even capable of doing? They're barely sentient. Okay. In Springfield, Ohio, right? You can say, oh, the Haitians are better workers. They get in car wrecks and kill kids and eat cats and worship Satan, man. Like voodoo is worshiping Satan. And you can't, until you can address that honestly and say, what are these people bringing to Springfield, Ohio that like we really, really need? Haitian mud pies, devil worship. Like what is Springfield, Ohio lacking in local color that bringing people with IQs in the 60s and 70s to Springfield is just going to make it better? Well, there's a lot of clinical social workers and government workers and teachers and, you know, real estate developers and other people who make a ton of money off of that. A lot of people who profit immensely by, you know, cheap labor. But what does the average person in Springfield, Ohio actually gain from, you know, this huge influx of Haitians? Answer, probably not very much. Just like the average person in Minnesota hasn't gained a whole lot by a whole bunch of Somalis showing up in their society, in their community. And until you're willing to address that sort of stuff and address the sort of structural stuff that, you know, your guests talk about all the time, nothing's going to get better. Everybody's going to have to take a haircut. You know, I'm sorry, boomers, but you know, your gold-plated house that you bought for $80,000 in 1983, which is the median home price in 1983, right? Which was 2.5 times the median wage, or 3.5 times the median yearly wage at the time. That's now worth, I did a show about this, so like last couple months ago. If that can't, you know, that house that was $80,000 in the mid 80s, that's now supposedly $650,000 and is now like 10 times the annual median income. Like if your grandkids are going to have a place to live, that has to come down to, you know, 4 times, 3.5 times the median wage. That means either houses prices have to go down, wages have to go way up, or both. And you can't keep bringing people in, because that bringing in people, 10, 20 million people in the last couple of years, or how many illegal immigrants are here? We have no idea. They've been saying 11 million for 20 years. Right? Well, those people got to go home so that those houses that they're in can be freed up for people who need a house.
Which, you know, it's never going to happen. That was the other thing, you know, mass deportations, that was never going to occur. But people believed it.
Well, I mean, it's what needs to occur.
But it's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, it's probably not, because Ruben Gallardo is going to be, you know, like he's the anti-mass deportation guy in the Senate.
We didn't even talk about the other guy. Mark Kelly's the other senator here.
Yeah, I mean, right?
I mean, talk about a double whammy.
Like, yeah, you know, this is the Senate, you know, this is the former home of like Barry Goldwater, right? Like, you know, and Mark Kelly, like, okay, yeah, you were an astronaut, great. Like, my wife got shot by a crazy person, so I think that like Americans shouldn't be able to defend themselves. Like, How about crazy person control, Mr. Kelly, Senator? How about that? Like, well, no, we can't do that. Why? Well, because crazy people are a key component of my voter base, right? Like, the women who are hopped up on SSRIs and box wine and birth control till they fry their ovaries and they're 37 and think all of a sudden that they're going to have a family now. It's like, whoa, sweetheart, sorry, a geriatric millennial woman who just turned 40 and now is ready to settle down. Like, you're not having kids at all. That ain't happening, sweetheart. And Senator Kelly, crazy people are a key part of his demographic. That's who votes for him. People wearing masks in their cars vote for Mark Kelly. So if he says, like, hey, if you're insane, maybe you shouldn't have a gun. Maybe you shouldn't be. Maybe we should reopen the insane asylums. He's not going to he's not going to do anything about that. He's not going to do anything about crazy people because they're all the people that vote for him. Look at what's the mayor of Phoenix's name?
Katie Gallego. She's the ex-wife of Ruben Gallego.
Right, Katie Gallego. Look at that woman's eyes and tell me she's not crazy. Tell me she's not crazy. Like, she's nuts. She hides it well, but she's nuts.
Yeah, this state is completely fucked. What do you think? What do you think is going to occur then in Trump's term, in terms from the economic standpoint? I mean, do you think it's going to come off the rails during that, or can they keep this thing limping along?
No, I think it's going to come off the rails. I think that there's too many things that could go wrong. Any kind of interest rate, functionally, like New York, Illinois, New Jersey are all already bankrupt. One of those goes right, and it's going to be dominoes.
The student loan bomb is supposed to start tomorrow, May 5th.
Yeah, I mean, student loans are going to be a thing
tomorrow. It's supposed to start.
Yeah. The wars. I mean, it only takes one sunk oil tanker, I mean, that'll be an enormous, like, boom, visible from space sort of thing, right? The Ben Gurion airport, the Houthis just hit that with a missile, right? I think it was the Houthis, right? But somebody just, middle of the runway, right? Like, there's too many. The war with Ukraine, we could get embroiled in that overnight. The Russians could find, I'm sure they've already found, but they could find American special forces or NATO special forces, and they could actually choose to be like, well, actually, you're aggressing against us. It's war now, right? And there could be war in Europe again for the first, like a generalized war in Europe for the first time since 1945. That would, screw the pooch pretty badly. And the British are, constantly, listen to Tom Luongo, right? Like, they're constantly agitating for a war because they have nothing left and they need to reset everything. The Chinese aren't stupid. Listen to Michael Yon. You think that the Chinese or the Iranians or the Russians, because the Russians have a huge Central Asian population, right? They have Kazakhs and Uzbeks and all these other people. They could pass for Mexican. You think that they're not, Uzbek guys who look Mexican, who could blow up a transformer in Los Angeles in July, cause a whole grid to fall down, like, right? Like, they could. What happens to Phoenix if the grid goes down in July? Because a deep cover penetration squad by the Chinese or the Russians, who looks Mexican, and they taught him to speak Spanish or whatever, but not that hard. Or the Iranians. Do you think that do you think they couldn't find somebody? You think that if U.S. sends a carrier group and bombs a oil port in Iran, that the one that they have on the Gulf Coast there, you think that they couldn't retaliate by activating Matt Bracken's talked about this stuff for years. Do you think the Chinese, the Canadian government, the Liberal Party in Canada, just, you think Mark Carney, there aren't Chinese spies in his government? You're high. You're absolutely smoking the good stuff if you think that Mark Carney's government isn't effectively just a pipeline to Chinese state security.
What's
Do you
your
think that they could? Yeah.
what's your biggest concern then now? Like what's at the top of the list?
My biggest concern right now is well, frankly, war and peace. That's it was worth electing Trump just for a shot at ending the wars. Because I think Kamala Harris would have doubled down on crazy and been like, and like actively gone after Vladimir Putin, who's the moderate in his country, right? I think she would have pushed more.
The economic does not concern you more though.
Well, no, I mean it does. I mean, but like, no matter what, like the economic thing was going to blow up no matter what. Like around this time, no matter what. Again, once baby boomers stopped having kids in like 1993 or whatever it was, the actuarial tables dictated that the crisis was going to be in the mid 2020s, right? That's just the way it was. And if you've been paying attention to conservative politics for any length of time, like I have for 30 years, right? Like, 2030 is not that far away, and we'll be in, multiple financial crises by then, and state pensions will be all bankrupt, and Social Security, and this is all stuff people have been talking about for years. But now we're here, and now the crisis is upon us, and no one wants to do anything, and that's just because it's part of democratic government, right? No one wants to be told, like, you can't have your cake and eat it too, and like people just generally want to pass the buck to people who are farsighted enough, conscientious enough. They don't like. They end up hosting niche podcasts on the internet, screaming about all the coming problems, as opposed to being elected to something, right? Because Democratic voters don't want to hear the truth about things, because then they'd have to change their lives. They'd have to do something. So, that's just the way it is, right? But as bad as the economy is going to be, or could get, if you have peace, there's still a chance at like turning the ship around, or coming up with something. But if you're at war with China and Iran and Russia and Venezuela all at the same time, like you just, it's bad, man. It's really bad. And I'm really disappointed in Donald Trump that he hasn't like worked harder for peace. But that's just part of the entrenched problem with the Washington bureaucracy, is they're all insane warmongers, because none of their kids died, and none of their neighborhoods got a street renamed or a bridge renamed for PFC John Smith, who went to the church down the street and never turned 24 because he died in Helmand or something. Like, it's the ordinary working people in this country who Lance Corporal James Jones Memorial Bridge, right? That's those people. And they got rich over the the 20 years of wasted time in life in Afghanistan. Raytheon made buckets of money. Boeing made tons of money. Halliburton made tons of money. I mean, they should all be, tried for treason and thrown in prison, but that's not going to happen. Right? Dick Cheney's going to die a wealthy man in his own bed.
Yeah, I the economic. I'll tell you, not that you asked me, but compelled to share. I know I'm running out of time here with you, but the economic concerns me more than the wars, because you saw the way people, acted during COVID, and you saw the fragility of our system, right? And the debt bomb at this point, you can't pay your way out of this. We're way beyond that. And what are people going to do when they realize like their 401ks, the value of them just plummets. It goes down and down and down and down. People are going to lose their shit. Like, and I don't know. I mean, you could see. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's just my own perception. But you can see the jaggedness of people. That's the right word. But you can see people on edge. And while wars are terrible, and my hope. I hate that word hope. I thought Trump would be able to at least the Russia Ukraine stuff. I thought he would be able to quell that. But man, I mean, what it looks like they're attempting to do with this new financial system and the Palantirs and Elon Musk and the instruments that are being put in place to lock our society down. I mean, that's just scary.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing: like Mark Andreessen or Elon Musk, they're very bright guys, but ultimately, right? Like they're both kind of chubby nerds. In like a world with tech and electricity, they're like mega billionaires who get to have houses in Vail and New York and London and Paris and Miami and they get whatever they want, right? Well, in a world without like reliable electricity and the internet, they're just like chubby nerds who are going to get eaten by somebody who's like not a chubby nerd.
And that's a different ball game, right? Like, I mean, that's what Jim and I were talking about the other day. Jim, Dave, and I. And yeah, of course, if there's no electricity, then it's literally survival of the fittest if that were to happen. But
even a world without reliable electricity, like you can have South Africa shows, like you can have there's a great deal of ruin in a nation, and you can still have like a reasonably functioning modern society with 10 hours a day of electricity. But what you can't have is like e-commerce platforms worth billions of dollars. Twitter's not nearly as useful if you can only access it 6 hours a day, right? So that's your server farms have to be up all the time. They have to have reliable electrical power all the time. And I mean, I'm worried about the economy. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. But Donald Trump was picked by these guys because they realized, like, Kamala Harris isn't just somebody that like doesn't agree with me. Like, she actively is like a hostile to civilization, and we need to, like, if 4 more years of this lady, and like there's nothing left, because I mean, we got to secure the votes and all that, but like 4 years of her or 8 years of her, and then 8 years of AOC, and then president for life Ilhan Omar. That's what you'd get. So maybe Donald Trump, could pull stuff out there. There's, stuff in the works to strip every illegal immigrant, post 1965 of their citizenship and their children. If that works, and everyone has to go home and they're not really eligible for Social Security and they're not eligible for, food stamps and Section 8 rental assistance, and they all just take their PlayStations and go home back to Mexico or El Salvador or wherever. Oh, that might help. Who knows? But
yeah,
you have to do something really drastic to save the system right now.
Yeah, I'm mentally. Well, I never thought that was going to happen anyway. But I like that. To me, I just don't see it occurring. I mean, and if I'm wrong, I'll be pleasantly surprised. Just like the whole. I never bought it. A couple of things I will say. I was wrong about who I thought would win the election, but because I thought that they would install her. But there was a reason why, the system selected him again. And I think we talked about it, and I've said it on other episodes too, why I think he was put in there. But I never bought into the Maha movement. I never bought into mass deportations. I didn't believe the Epstein files. I mean, I've heard all this. I've heard it. I didn't believe Fauci was going to be, brought in on charges, or Obama, any of that. Like, because we've seen this movie over and over and over again. But yet the masses were, sorry, I'm kind of going on a rant here, but the masses were, oh, justice. Oh, I want to see McGregor as the Attorney General, or no, Secretary of State, or just all these scenarios. And I don't know. I mean, we've seen, have we seen this movie? Arizona 2020 election. They did the audit here that summer in 21. Brnovich was the Attorney General, Republican. I remember talking to my friend Christina Bobb, and she was like, "Yeah, I think he'll do something. He won't just punt the whole thing." He didn't do anything.
Of course not. He got in because he's the Attorney General because they stole it.
Well, no, he was the existing Attorney General. So he termed out at 22, and that's when Chris Mays won it over Abe Hamadeh. But he had an opportunity. He could have done something with the evidence. He didn't do it. So, and that was in Arizona.
Because he wants to be senator, or he wants to be something else.
Right.
If he'd done something, or he wants to be governor, or he wants to have a cool, easy job working for a big consulting firm making, $750,000 a year. And if he rocks the boat by pointing out the fact that like the election was stolen in Arizona and a bunch of other places, right? And what people are finding out today is that the rest of the world does not tell the truth, and it's habitually like steals and is dishonest. Right? Americans tell the truth way more than other people. They don't steal the way other people do, but everyone else in the world is here trying to steal your stuff and hurt you, and they don't care.
And the government let it happen. They've let this happen.
Right. Well, it's just anarcho-tyranny. It's just, Sam Francis's term. Right. But where in 1970, the average white American could be like, it's nothing. Well, now, they're living in a van with, their girlfriend and a dog, and they're 35 years old, and they'd like to have a house and kids and some economic stability in their lives, but they're core millennials. And so this is they had, if you were born, if you're 35 years old this year, you were born in 1990. So there was the dot-com bust in 2000, right? And the post 9/11 recession, and then the 08 crisis we never really got out of. And, this upcoming, like you're 35 years old and you've had 3 major economic crises in your adult lifetime. Like you never had a chance to make it. And all these people who are wealthy tell you you're a bad person for caring about the fact that, like a crazy homeless person poops on your lawn. Well, you're not going to have a whole lot of sympathy or care about anything when you've been pushed against the wall like these people have. And, for all these boomers, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're more conscientious and you care more and you understand more. But do you really think the Somalis and the Haitians and the Venezuelans and the whoever else that got imported to take care of you at 60 or at 70 or 75 or 80 years old, when you're old and in a nursing home, you think that they're going to care about you? You think they're not just going to beat you up and take your stuff? Especially when they've been told by the entire media apparatus in America that like you're old and racist and privileged, and that they're oppressed, and that taking your stuff is like a way to like make things fair again. They're just here to steal in the first place. You think that they're not gonna just like, you might have that nice silver picture frame of your grandkids. You think they aren't just gonna smash the glass and take the silver? Of course they are. It's what they do now.
Isn't it crazy how did you ever see the movie Alien Nation with James Caan from like the late 80s, early 90s?
Uh, maybe. I can't remember.
It's like late, it was like, I don't know, maybe 1988, but it was, it was these aliens that came to live on Earth, and then they let them become cops, and there were good ones and bad ones, and but they're painted as victims, and you look at that now, and you're like, man, Hollywood was, they were putting this out back then.
Well, yeah, and who runs Hollywood, right?
Well, and the boomers too. This is the difference between me and them. First of all, they don't listen, and this isn't all of them, but the ones that I'm encountering, and the ones that message me, it signals to me. They don't listen. They don't want to listen. That's why there's a huge disconnect between them and younger people. And I don't blame younger people for not wanting to listen to some of them, because they don't take any feedback. I know what's right. I know what's right. I know what's right. The system is going to work itself out because it always has for them. Well, I feel like it's different this time, and you and I just shared this for 90 minutes. The system is not salvageable.
No, it's not. And to the extent that it is, it would require a total Caesar moment. It would require someone to walk into the Senate and be like, I'm in charge now. We're going to fix things. And Donald Trump doesn't have that in him.
No. And he didn't have it in the first go around. And and the whole idea of like, oh, it's going to be different this time. Well, okay, it's not. And I hear that, yeah, it's Kash Patel is going to save the day. It's Pam Bondi going to save the day. Kash Patel is going to save the day. Now it's Dan Bongino is going to save the day. No. Elon Musk is already gone. He's not going to save the day. It's just not going to work like that. And if it does, I'll come on here. I was wrong. I'm pleasantly surprised.
I will come on here and you will hear me eat a hat. I will apologize and admit, Mike, I was wrong. And I will cut up like a dirty trucker MAGA hat, and I will eat it live on air. But it ain't happening, because Kash Patel would have to admit that, like, a huge part of the problem is his co-ethnics are like really dishonest people. You think Kash Patel is going to get up on national television and say, a huge part of a problem is that South Asians are like habitually really dishonest and scammy? He's not going to do it. He's just not going to do it.
Yeah, I have mentally, I mean, I was never really there to begin with, but, mentally moved on from any of that anymore. If any of that, any type of justice is going to come out of this administration, any type of accountability, I think there's way more things to be focusing on. And, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, people can do whatever they want to do, but, and it's not a lack of hopelessness. It's just looking at the reality of the situation. This is where it is. And I'm not selling unicorns and butterflies for all the people that are saying I'm hopeless. I'm not hopeless. I get up every single day, right? I run, I do the things that I need to do. That I'm not laying in bed, not laying in bed waiting to die.
Yeah, well, if it was hopeless, why even do the show?
Right.
Like for those of you out there in Radio Land, doing this show is a ridiculous amount of work. There's hundreds of dollars worth of books that need to be purchased. There's hours every day coordinating back and forth with people on email about when they can get on. There's, spending hours every day trying to fit like this puzzle piece of a calendar of like, okay, Jim Kunstler's available from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on, this Tuesday, Eastern time, and so-and-so is available at the same time, West Coast. And, I got to coordinate this. And it's a lot of work, folks. It's not just like sitting down and jawing in front of the computer for, 2 hours or whatever.
Well, but even, and I appreciate that, but it's not even so much that it's the fact that, I don't know. I mean, I don't think going to, I mean, yeah, you want to get involved locally, but on the same token, you just have to look at where things are. And, I don't think the system's salvageable. I mean, you could yell at people on social media. You can go down to, school board meetings and scream at people. What is that really going to do? Do you think they give a fuck what people come
No.
down there and yell? Are you going to cross the barrier and go after somebody? And I'm not saying anybody to do that, but then you're in jail.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, and do you think in a world where the police are going after that Shiloh Hendricks gal and trying to get her arrested for saying a word, and they don't arrest people for beating people up or sexual assault, you think that's a solvable problem? Using the same police and the same police commissioners and the same, you know, you think the school board that just sits there while American kids get beat up by foreigners in the halls of the school and no learning is taking place, you think going to them and complaining is going to fix it? They know that's what's happening. The purpose of a system is what it does, is the great Orrin McIntyre put it, right? If this is what the system is doing, that's what it's designed to do. So, you know, leave someplace like Los Angeles, find someplace with some water, and start building your own systems, because the one that exists now is not going to survive.
or you leave the country if people have the ability to do that. I know most people don't, but if you have the ability to do that, that you either deal with what's coming, the new system that is getting put into place as we speak, and you personally take care of yourself and your family. But that's what people should have been doing to begin with. Like this whole notion of like, this is a bad time and things will get better. And yeah, I don't see it that way. But what do I know? The only one listening to me is you right now, DE. So,
Well, I think that you've grown yourself a pretty good sized audience by just telling the truth. And I think that's, if nothing else, someone will find like episodes of Coffee and a Mike on some USB stick somewhere, and they're like, oh, there was this honest man. And I, for my self-respect's sake, I can't just sit here and watch it all fall apart and not say anything. And I really appreciate all the work you put in to give people like me a chance to talk to folks, and all the other really great guests you've had on. I have mentioned a bunch of them before, but our mutual friend Pete Quinones is one I really respect, and all the other folks I've mentioned. But I think that just telling the truth is a virtuous act in and of itself, and I applaud you for that. So regardless, you did the one thing. You didn't lie. And that's something worth talking about. That's something worth being proud of.
I appreciate that. Where can people find you?
I have a Telegram channel. I've got my own religiously focused podcast, The Fundamental Principle, on Substack. I can be found once a month on Pete Quinones' show on Thought Crime Syndicate and elsewhere. Usually I'll post a link to my Telegram, which is app banned, by the way. So if you're looking for it through like the Google or through the Apple store, I'm sorry, you're not going to find it. You're going to have to. So I'll get Mike the links, and I just appreciate the opportunity to jaw with a man I respect. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad we made this happen so quickly. So to give your Substack again for people that don't.
I'll send you a link. It's Fundamental Principle.
Fundamental Principle. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I put that in the show notes too. So, DE, I always enjoy this, and we can't have it be too long for the next conversation. And I do want to have you and Pete on together. It reminds me, I haven't talked to Pete in a little while. I need to ping him and get him on here, and we talk about the world. So,
someone else that I should have mentioned is Z-Man. The fact that you had Z on all the time is, I really find him very valuable as well. So, it's august company I'm in, and I appreciate being included. So thank you very much.
Until next time, mic drop.